It's that time again, another episode of Critical History. Last time out, we discussed a little bit about the background to and the reasons for the 100 Years' War. 4 French kings in 15 years certainly didn't help, but ultimately what sparked the war was the claim by Edward III, King of England, to the French crown, because his mother was the daughter of Philip the Fair. The French nobility, for their part, clung tightly to their interpretation of the ancient Salic law, which is another way of saying they decided who they wanted to be the king. It wasn't Edward III, and then they found a way to justify that decision from a legal perspective. Even Edward III's claim, although a strong one, is likely not one that he expected would lead to him being crowned king of a united England and France. He was just expecting to be bribed with additional French lands, or gold, to make his claim go away. So where were we? Yes. After about 8 years of raiding each other's territories, the conflict's intensity ratcheted up with the Battle of Oberosh, culminating in October 1345 with a convincing English-Gascon victory. At the start of the year, Edward had decided his best chance for success was to attack along 3 fronts. This made sense as linking up the forces from England with the forces in Gascony was a bit of a logistical nightmare, not helped by the Bay of Biscay, known for having some of the roughest seas in the world. A small force was sent to disembark in Gascony as well as in Brittany, while the bulk of Edward's forces headed for the part of the continent nearest to England, Flanders. The main army wasn't actually able to disembark as a storm scattered the ships, and not knowing where they were or where to reassemble, most crossed the channel back to the south coast of England. The other fronts, though, had more luck. In Gascony, a number of minor forts and castles were besieged successfully before the French had a chance to mobilize. It seems many locals also joined the Anglo-Gascon efforts at this time. Because of the nature of warfare at this time, it wasn't so much territory that was held by each side, but rather strongholds. Controlling a town could mean controlling an important bridge or river ford, and a castle provided a lookout over an important trade route and a base of operations. The English-Gascon army moved east of Bordeaux to see if they could push back the French and take control of some of the less well-defended strongholds, which would make it more difficult for the French to lay siege to Bordeaux, and easier for the English to push further inland. The French had managed to gather a larger army, but it was likely mostly militia that would seek to force strongholds to surrender simply through force of numbers. But remember what I said about logistics? It's not such a simple matter to sustain a camp of 20,000 poorly armed peasants. So it seems the French split their army into at least 3. A third of the French army then laid siege to Auberoche, a small but strategically important castle. The English commander, the Earl of Derby, only had an army of about 1,500 men, with about a third of them being knights, so-called men-at-arms. And the rest seemed to have been mounted archers, which would have made the army highly mobile. It was also around this time that all sports other than archery were actually made illegal in England, on Sundays anyway. And as a result, every adult male was expected to practice archery at least 1 day a week. The Earl conducted reconnaissance on the French army's camp outside Oberosh and made plans for a 3-pronged attack. The longbowmen attacked first from the tree line to the west, catching the French completely by surprise just as they were starting to eat their dinner. Next, the knights charged across the field from the south, while the French were still in complete disarray. A small group of soldiers had also flanked all the way around, so while the French engaged the archers and the knights, they were able to emerge from the northwest to launch a 3rd surprise attack. The men in arms inside the castle realized this was their chance, and they rode out from the castle, completing the rout. Because the English had captured a siege camp, there was a great deal of loot and supplies, not to mention the many knights and nobility that were captured and held for ransom. The ransoms from this battle alone were said to have been equal to the English king's annual income. More importantly, though, was that it won the hearts and minds of the locals and completely demoralized the French, who basically disbanded their armies, gave up their other sieges, and abandoned the territory, not to regain it for 30 years. What can you learn from this battle? Well, it shows pretty clearly how the element of surprise is a terrific force multiplier. It shows the importance of logistics, and it shows why medieval battles did not all end with as much bloodshed as we might expect. based on Hollywood representation of the era. Because if the nobleman surrendered, he was worth much more alive than dead. This also explains how morale could shift so quickly in a battle. If you saw that your entire army was in disarray and a handful of your fellow soldiers started to retreat, why fight to the death if you could simply surrender? Of course, this changed over the years and as the war progressed, because if you had been warring against the same nobleman for a decade, you were more likely to be tortured and then executed than ransomed. In which case, fighting to the death makes a lot of sense. That about does it for this episode. Like I've mentioned previously, I am pretty busy preparing to write my second work of fiction at the moment, the sequel to Conquest of Truth, but in the next video I'll try to tackle all the major battles of the remainder of the 100 Years' War, from Crécy and Poitiers to Agincourt, with a special focus on the impact made by Joan of Arc. Now, if you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up, subscribe, check out my book, and tune in next time. Until then, stay critical.